I'm investigative journalist Mollie Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice.
Hey y'all, I'm Mollie Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential Podcast, where we cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up here in Northwest Florida and beyond. Today, we're revisiting the kidnapping, assaulting, and murdering of young women, co-eds who went away to college with a head full of dreams, only to have it all cut short by someone who seemingly decided it was just time for them to die. It's an absolute tragedy, and joining me as always to discuss these cases is Pam Hill. She's a pharmacist and victims advocate. Pam has experienced violent crime herself and her own family. Her sister Sharon Adelot was brutally killed by her own son, Pam's nephew, and it's a case that's still ongoing. So she talks from experience when we cover cases like this. And Pam, again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So we're talking about several cases here. One that's over 30 years old, came from right here in Pensacola. Susan Morris, a student at the University of West Florida, was murdered on campus simply walking to her car after a late class. Mollie Tibbetts vanished in 2018 while out on a run and was found murdered. And the same thing basically happened recently to Laken Riley at the University of Georgia, also out for a run and was attacked and murdered. So, Pam, these are all tragic stories. I mean, and as a parent, even though my daughter is not college age, it just scares me to death to think that there are predators out there watching them and waiting for opportunities.
Oh, no doubt. Because when you're young like that, like you said, a head full of dreams, you're just doing some of your daily things and out jogging or getting out of school late and getting in your car and leaving. I mean, I never thought about things like that when I was in college. My mother did. And I went to Samford University, so we had Pinkerton patrol. And you had to be back on campus at a certain time back in the day when I was there. Or they knew, men weren't in the girls' dorms. They get out, at a certain time. And just those kind of rules. And I loved that bubble. It was protective. And both of my parents did too. They liked me being there. Because I was a little bit naive when I was that age. But, they're just trying to do what sweet little ladies do. Sorority girls in intramurals, studying. For instance, all of them had careers picked out.
I know. And I remember what happened to Susan Morris. I also went to the University of West Florida. I was just a few years behind her. I graduated from high school in 1991, and I went the community college route over at what was then Okaloosa-Walton Community College, which is now Northwest Florida State College. I did my 2 years AA there, and then I switched over for my broadcast journalism degree at the University of West Florida. And I remember when I started taking my classes at the campus at Pensacola, there's a bench there in memorial of her, because if you've never been to the University of West Florida campus in Pensacola, first of all, y'all, Pensacola is beautiful.
It is. And so is UWF.
Yes, and not just our beaches. There's just beautiful trees. The landscaping's gorgeous, and that is exactly what UWF is. It's a beautiful campus, very natural, walking trails all throughout, and it's really grown a lot. Even if you were to visit the campus now, it's entirely different than it was 30 years ago when I first started to go. It's grown a lot, just in terms of the programs that they offer, as well as the literal physical buildings that are on the campus. It's still, on the north side of town, lots and lots of trees, lots of beautiful landscaping, lots of woods. But back then it was very woodsy. But, there was always lighting. There was always adequate security, if you will. But, when somebody is out to prey on you, when you have a predator stalking young people, they're going to find a way to do that. And that's exactly what happened in the case of Susan Morris. I remember she was in the sorority. I remember people talking about her. I remember the bench. And it's one of those things, like, as you're going to class, like, gosh, I can't believe a girl my age was doing the same thing, walking to her car, and some guy just saw her and ended her life. So you want to tell us a little bit about what happened?
Sure. UWF started out with 25 buildings, and 15 of them were dormitories. So they've come a long way. They've got over 60 plus buildings and have given out like 100,000 degrees. So, I mean, that's very impressive. And it's a 4-year school now, 4-year university. So you get the whole college experience. They've now got a football team. But what was happening to Susan Morris? She had been in a late night class. She basically wanted to be in video, film type of industry. And she loved that. She even worked at Video Vendor, what, was sort of like a Blockbuster. We all remember that too.
Oh, yeah.
Fun times, And it was a time of like bigger hair. Clinton was the president. Barney was popular. Jurassic Park. There were no www.com and not any cell phones.
Right.
Okay?
That's right.
So they're getting out of a late night class. It's foggy over there at UWF, but her car was parked out there. And it was late. So her friend, a guy, said, Susan, you want me to walk you to your car? And she's like, no, I'm fine, because she thought she was. But she's at her car, and then this guy named Eric Scott Branch sees her, and he basically takes control over her and takes her car. He assaults her sexually. He basically kidnaps her and beats her to death. He even assaulted her with a stick. And that was right down there near those beautiful walking trails, the nature trail. And that is what happened there because Eric Scott Branch had been in prison in Indiana for raping a 14-year-old. Then somebody mistakenly let him out early. After that, he went to Panama City because he knew he had to get out of Indiana. And then he rapes a girl down there. 10 days later, he comes over to Pensacola, hangs out on the UWF campus like he belongs. So there we are. That's where we're set up. This sweet little girl. And she loves life. She loves her family. One of the things that makes me very, very sad, it was January. So she got a real pretty Christmas sweater. And she was so excited that she was going to wear her Christmas sweater that day. But that's the day that he murdered her.
I know, and it's just heartbreaking and tragic when you hear that he should have been in prison and that he was released and he went right back to doing what he does because it wasn't just her. He raped a woman in Panama City. And in fact, I've regularly followed unsolved and cold cases in our area for years. I've been a reporter around here for years. And one of the stories that I have followed literally for decades is the disappearance of Joanna Otto.
Yeah.
She also was a young woman who would have been around my age. She's missing and presumed dead. And in fact, I think we've done an episode or two on that one, but I stay in touch with her mother, Kathy Hoside. But in looking at some of those old documents when they were looking for Joanna, they actually considered if Eric Branch could also have been a suspect in her murder and disappearance because of what he had done to Susan Morris. But the timeline didn't match. They realized that the night that Joanna Otto disappeared in Pensacola, Eric was actually in Panama City. And that's where he got busted for raping a young woman there too.
Yeah. And then Eric Scott Branch, he's got some weird thinking. There's something wrong with his brain. But they were looking for Susan, her parents. She'd still live with her parents. And she didn't come home. So her mother calls the campus police and the police. And so they're looking for Susan. They find her 2 days later in the shallow grave with leaves over her, and it was just terrible.
God love her family. That's definitely not the outcome that you want, to have to wait those 48 hours praying, hoping that it's not the worst case scenario, and then to have the news delivered that she is in fact dead. It is the worst case scenario. And the only blessing, and it is, for lack of a better word, because I've met so many families who did not get a chance to have that closure. And I think of Kathy Hoside, she desperately would love to be able to bury her baby girl. I know of another mother whose young daughter disappeared. She has since killed herself. Susan Bell, her daughter Danielle Bell, missing for decades, 14 years old. And it's hard. It's hard to deal with the grief. It's hard to deal with the loss. And it's especially painful when it's like a wound that's left open not to heal. And so I'm thankful for the Morris family that they did find her body. But at the same time, I'm so sorry that it had that ending.
I know. And she was just so sweet. And she liked the big hair too.
I know. Well, that was the thing. How much did we destroy the atmosphere with all the Aquanet? Just trying to get it sticking up 6 or 7 inches off our
Yeah,
head.
to make like a helmet like off Still Magnolias.
I know, it's so true. But I remember that. I remember, it was a big deal when you're just a kid right out of just starting college. You feel like an adult. You feel important. You want to be autonomous. You want to be independent. Just going to and from your car to class feels like a big deal. Just being out on your own, even though you live with your parents. I lived with my parents the first couple of years of school. In fact, I didn't move out until like the last essentially 3 to 6 months of my college career. And that was when I moved over to Pensacola. But everybody talked about the Susan Morris case because it was about vigilance. It was about being aware. I think there was probably some additional security efforts that were made, perhaps more lighting. And those, again, pre-cell phone times, but I think there was like some call boxes placed in different places. But the thing about it is, if somebody is out to murder someone, like Eric Scott Branch certainly had ill intentions with just about any woman he came across. He wasn't going to stop until he was caught, in my personal opinion.
Right.
But, what good is a call box going to do if you're trying to run away from a killer?
Right. Right.
You almost have to know that's going to happen.
Right. Exactly. And it is, in the aftermath of this, they did implement some programs like that to make sure all the blue boxes were working, and they were pretty much everywhere. I look for them because I used to go there at night and study at the library, and then I would try to leave before it got dark. But when you're studying something, it would get dark quickly. So I would ask someone to walk me to my car because I just, this stuff scares me. I remember it. And that's why I remember his name, Eric Scott Branch, because he caused so much trouble. He basically was found guilty and with a 10-2 death penalty. So that was during that time. He wasn't happy with that. And since then, it has changed to, it has to be a unanimous jury verdict. But after he got in jail or prison and then on death row, he wanted an appeal because he said, if that's the law now, then I don't get the death penalty. Yes, you do, because we're going by the law that was happening when you were convicted. So that Take Back the Night, increasing lighting, Just To It is a program that they started 2 at a time, which made some sense, and the blue boxes everywhere. So her sister, I think her name's Wendy, she wrote an article and she said Susan loved her little red Toyota Celica because her sister didn't know how to drive stick shift.
Yeah,
So
I barely could either. I don't blame her.
Same. But she said, Susan was going to teach me how to drive stick shift in that little red car. And I'm 54 years old now, and I don't know how to drive that car.
God love her. I know. It's amazing the things that we remember.
And she said that they identified Susan by her dental records. So that tells you what kind of person did that. Someone that would just beat you down. Just take her car. But he couldn't do that because
that mofo wanted to hurt her. He wanted to hurt somebody.
Right. Well, he raped in Indiana, got out, came and raped immediately. 10 more days came and raped. There's something wrong with him. But so they...
Not no mo.
No.
He's dead.
Right. Yes, he is. And so speaking of that, when they were getting him prepped and ready for the death penalty or the death sentence, he started shouting and screaming and wiggling and doing stuff, kind of protesting. That was after he had his last meal of a pork chop and T-bone steak, some French fries, 2 pints of Ben & Jerry, and some ginger ale. That was his last meal, but these were his last words. He yells out, "Murderers, murderers, murderers," 3 times, and he's yelling basically that at Governor Rick Scott and Pam Bondi. He's telling the people on
Attorney General. State
right,
Attorney
exactly. He's telling the people that are on the team that are going to administer the cocktail to him that he said, "I've heard y'all are good people, but let these people come on down here. Make them come do this to me."
Yeah.
He made such a big political statement like that. Those were his last words. And he'd kicked around until his glasses fell off. So he was quite the...
made the spectacle.
Yeah.
But he sure didn't mind taking the life of the other people. Like, what if Susan Morris had said, "Stop, murderer, murderer, murderer"?
Right.
What if anybody who had tried to stop, rapist, rapist, rapist?
Exactly.
So your rights now matter, dude? Sorry.
Yeah. Isn't that where we always go? I mean, sometimes it's good to be a criminal in the system because they get protected so much. So many years of appeals with this when the answer, just straight up answer. That's why I like judges that are no people that say, look, that's your sentence. That's what happened. We're not revisiting every time things go a different way. When things get stricter, are we going to go in the jail and go, now this is punishable by this many years, so you're going to serve that. Your verdict is true in that moment, and we don't change it. But I guess some people, some lawyers know how to argue to get something changed the way they want it. And I mean, that's just good on their part, I guess. But he basically just made a fool out of himself. Susan's family, her sister was there, and she said, we have grieved for her longer than we had her on this earth. And that just broke my heart, because they're still sending letters and articles back to Argos, the Argonauts, about every 5 years. But Wendy wrote the last letter there, and I could.
Wendy's the sister.
Right. And I just cried and wept when I read it, because my sister was murdered, so it just means something. But I mean, I think about it every single time I go to West Florida, and I'm so thankful for the bench. A fraternity donated that, took up the money for that. And it was a fraternity that she was a little sister of. And then her sorority brought the stone artwork over there. And her sister said, please go and enjoy the bench and the artwork, because Susan mattered. And we want that to be a beautiful memory of her.
Absolutely. I know. And I think about it with these other two young women too. And those cases are much more recent. And one of them, there's a conviction, Mollie Tibbetts, and Laken Riley just recently happened. But I am thankful for the Morris family, as terrible as it is that it happened at UWF and on that campus. The silver lining is that they had the support. Mm-hmm. The university cared. They made changes to improve security. The fraternity, the sorority, the fellow students that knew her. I mean, there's nothing that can bring any more comfort to a grieving family than to know that their loved one will be missed and remembered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Dr. Judy Bentz, too, was making sure things like something good came out of it, so we don't have to do this over and over and over again. So, we remember seeing the headline, slain student, and right here, it's just 2 miles from my house, UWF, or maybe 4. But every time I'd go, I would think of her and pray for her and her family.
Yes. Well, let's talk about Mollie Tibbetts. That was another case that was just tragic, unexpected, unnecessary, so violent, heartbreaks for the parents. And unfortunately, that case almost went off the radar just because it happened during COVID when we were all in the midst of the lockdown.
Right. And when they made courts smaller and not many people could come to court, and people at home were not necessarily tuning in for more bad news. They were just trying to get through COVID. So it was a very awkward and different time. And I think cases that were coming up during that time either got too much attention or too little attention. But this was a national case. People heard about Mollie Tibbetts.
What happened?
Well, basically, she was a little bitty thing. She's like 5'3", 120 pounds, and she went out for her run. They said she typically would run between 1 and 6 miles a day. And she wanted to major in psychology. She had her little self together. She would live sometimes at her boyfriend's house and sometimes with her parents, especially during the summer. So she...
Sounds like a typical college girl to me.
Yeah, back and forth. So, and her mother kept up with her. She talked to her mother every single day.
Yeah. So
So she was out running, and this guy comes by, and he sees her, but he just kept circling around, coming back by her. So he gets out of his car because he said, she's hot. I mean, that's what he said.
And surely she's jogging so he can admire her.
Okay, yeah.
That's what some of these guys think.
Yeah. And he is over here illegally. He works at one of the dairy farms there in Iowa, and he has worked there for 4 years. So he sees her, then he gets out and he actually runs beside her. She didn't invite him to do that.
Creepy and scary.
Yeah. And I don't know what he was saying to her, if anything, but she picked up her cell phone and told him, leave me alone. I'm going to call 911. So he didn't. So she tried to call 911, and he said the next thing he knew, that her body, her bleeding body and dead, was in the back of his car, or in his car.
So he claimed to have blacked out.
Yeah. He got so mad and so scared.
Because she was going to call the police.
Mm-hmm. And that would mean Homeland Security. That would mean ICE.
So tell us about this guy before we get into that.
Okay.
He was not from here.
No, he wasn't from here. I think he was about 26 years old. I forget where he came from. I know Mexico is what I think. He was over here. He's a good worker, they said, and
Was he here legally or illegally?
illegally,
Okay,
undocumented.
So he was an undocumented worker. Okay.
That's what got everybody so stirred up
right,
over
because
this
we've
case.
got such immigration issues.
Right, and he shouldn't have been here in the first place. Just like when we talked about Susan, that guy shouldn't have been there in the first place. He should still be in prison. But these are men that come up and go, today's your last day, you dying.
Right.
You know, so
just because these women were there.
Right, just because they were there. So he basically killed her, I guess, in his blackout. And so he goes and puts her in a cornfield and covers her up with corn stalks and corn husk over there. So they say she had little black running shoes, colorful running shoes that were black too, and black running pants and a red top, like a sports top. And I would think that would probably be sort of like a sports bra too, the way they were describing it. His name was Christian Bahayan Rivera, and he was over here. And after he took her into the cornfield and stuff, he went on back to being a dairy worker. So as things would happen, they found Christiane. And when they found him, he took them right to where her body was in the cornfield.
He must have felt guilty.
I guess. But then he must have had some other feelings too, because he sexually assaulted her. He stabbed her. Her cause of death was sharp force trauma. And he stabbed her, I think, 8 to 12 times all over. And she didn't stand a chance, little small thing. But he's mostly Spanish speaking. And he also came up with a different big lie, a Pinocchio Joe, because he made up another lie, basically, and said he was in the shower at his house, and 2 men came in with sharp knives and stuff and basically told him to drive somewhere. And then they saw Mollie jogging, and he had to go get her because they were going to hurt him, because he said they were going to use her for sex trafficking, that those guys had said that. So basically, none of that's true, but that's the extra story that he told. So
Trying to get out of trouble.
Right, and I think he told that after he was convicted, because he got life in prison without the chance of parole. And I watched a lot of that when that was going on, just in little things. He has an interpreter or translator sitting right there by him. Everything the judge says, everything anybody else says, she says to them. So it's kind of uncomfortable. It's loud. There's extra talking over here. And he's sitting there and only answering like no, si, yes, no and yes, real small words. And so it was just interesting to me, because I think that he was desperate, like the other story that we talked about, Eric Scott Branch, because they know when they get caught, that's the end, because he shouldn't have been here in the first place. He had been working over here illegally for 4 years, and he murdered her.
Unbelievable. Oh, bless her heart.
I know. And the way they found her, she had a Fitbit on, and she had her earbuds in and her cell phone. So every one of those emit a signal. And that's what's different today. We are more in touch than, say, like Susan Morris back in 93.
Right. Yeah, so, 2018 was when Tibbetts was killed, and at least they were able to tap into that technology to help find her.
Right. And her friends knew where she was most of the time. She kept a pretty decent schedule. She worked at a daycare, and that's how they knew to go looking for her. She didn't show up at her daycare job. And they're like, she wouldn't do that. And what they tried to do, she had a boyfriend named Dalton Jacks, and they had dated for a little while, and he was out of town because obviously he's a suspect, because he's close to her in her life. But thank goodness he was gone. But you know how they bring up people's past and stuff? They said, well, he stayed angry sometimes, and he liked to hunt and all this stuff. He was in another part of the state working on building a bridge. And so he was heartbroken. He really, really cared about her. I don't know if they loved each other or not, but he really, really cared about her. But now, what's happening now is that they're trying to blame it on him and dig up reasonable doubt. You should have done all this at the trial.
Right.
It just kills me how people just want to keep it going. That's just hard for her parents. They even had a $300,000 reward. The family did.
Because they had to look for a month.
Yeah. And then they said, even the abductor can get this $300,000. Just tell us where our daughter is.
I know. That's what we were talking about with the Susan Moore's case. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm thankful that her family found her body.
Yes.
Because I know it's just heart-wrenching to not have that, to just have it hanging there.
Yeah, that's unclosed.
Not knowing.
Right. But, with Mollie Tibbetts, I think that at the University of Iowa, the students were really close to each other. And they knew where she went, what she did, and she wasn't the kind of person to withhold that kind of stuff. And they also could tell kind of where she was because she was Snapchatting with other people. And all these things that we do on our phone, somebody smarter than me and way smarter than me can figure out that technology and know where to look or kind of can place her.
Left a digital trail.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just so tragic. I know. And the families, as you know, get a chance to speak sometimes to the perpetrator to give their victim's impact statement.
Mm-hmm.
I think from what I understand, her family was just anxious for him to know what it feels like. You desperately want them to understand your pain.
Right.
I think, and to feel your pain. Because it's so horrendous. It's hard to imagine that, especially as a parent, you've worked so hard to bring this child into the world. You love them from the time they're itty bitty babies and they're helpless and they need everything done for them. You pour your heart and soul into raising a child if you care at all. And then to have someone just see them as just an object for their gratification and to end their life and to take them from this world so violently, a human being that you've just poured yourself into, it's just heart-wrenching for these parents and loved ones.
Right. And you come over here to the United States for a better life, but yet you kill someone and you don't have a better life because you're incarcerated. Some people it might be better, but they keep talking about how gentle that Christiane was and all that pleasant, and it was
not to Mollie Tibbetts.
That's right. That's what I was thinking. Why couldn't he stay that way then?
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't doing anything. All three of these
running and being her own, living her life. She had every right to do that.
So they had 200 people looking for her, helicopters, drones, all the new things. And one of the extra remarkable things was that she was loved on that campus, and she was loved by her friends, and over 2,000 people attended her funeral.
God love her. Just a 20-year-old young woman trying to make her way in this world, and somebody just snuffed it out because that's what he wanted to do.
Right, because she just got in the way of him. He couldn't do the right thing, but he sure could do the wrong thing.
It's similar in a lot of ways to what happened to Laken Riley.
Yes, most at University of Georgia.
Yes, and that's very recent.
Right. Yes, just like in the past couple of weeks. And University of Georgia is so beautiful. It's pristine. It's that old Georgian style.
Have you been there?
Yeah. I've been there with my sorority up there. We have a pharmacy sorority at University of Georgia. And you get into all the Bulldog and the Athens, and it is so fun. And I like the campus. It's big. They even got their own ice cream shop that they make ice cream there.
Very cool.
Ice cream. It's just so cool. I could live there.
Yeah.
I like
fun
that.
College town.
Exactly. And just so sweet. I love my Southern people.
Of course.
Yes. But this little Laken Riley was a little Southern belle too. She was 22 years old, and she was out running. She just wanted to go out running. They said she ran quite often every day too. So she goes out running, and then she disappears, vanishes. So they find her in the woods where she was running, and they find her in a state of disarray that was very disrespectful. And
another shallow grave situation.
Yeah, yep. So there she was. And that on the University of Georgia, they got to moving fast on this one, because I truly believe when this Jose Ibarra guy from Venezuela, he shouldn't have been here either. He was here undocumented. He basically took her and killed her and then put her in a secluded place. Now, we don't know a whole lot of the details and stuff right now because, like you said, this happened so recently. But people think her taking the 911 route, picking her phone up, I'm going to call 911 or emergency, they think that made him panic too. And he was really, really mad about that.
Well, do they think that he took her someplace alive and kept her before he killed her? Or do they think that he killed her there on the spot?
I think he lured her away or took her away because she's on the campus. She's on the University of Georgia campus, just like Mollie Tibbetts. Got her running gear on, her phone, and watch. So she could have, but it took them, I think, 2 days to find her, I think.
How did they find him? How did they narrow him down as the suspect?
I don't know yet. I'm still trying to find that out and watch that. But mostly I'm watching it from the Mollie Tibbetts point of view, that how we tell people, pull that little tear gas you've got, or do this or do that, or find on your phone the emergency number. When I want to find something on my phone, I can't, especially if I'm in a hurry.
Right.
But, we've got to get more things that are safer. So this call at the University of Georgia, they're already raising all kind of, up there, because they said our campus needs to be safer. We need more blue light boxes. We need more lights. We need more people observing us. We need these people that don't belong on campus coming on campus. And we need you to help us find a way to get home at night when we're studying late. Because, even getting an Uber or Lyft is dangerous.
Well, you're still getting into the car with a stranger,
right.
most likely.
And they know you're standing right there on the University of Georgia campus by yourself. And usually when you go running, you don't carry a lot of stuff. You don't have a whole lot of money with you. You don't bring a lot of your things with you.
Right. Your ID, not necessarily. Right.
Right. So he physically stopped her from calling 911. He wouldn't let her. So I don't know how they know all that right now, but
just some of the preliminary details that have been released. Have they released her cause of death?
Well, she had a disfigured skull from blunt force trauma is what they're saying.
Oh, bless her heart.
All she's just trying to do is just run. And the students are so smart there. There's something that things that start at a university a lot of times scare people because they're not so wild out there. They're just passionate. And so they were saying, where are the riots? Where is all the hell raising? That's what they're saying. But I can't remember who, but cooler heads had prevailed and said, look, let's don't lose her in all this fracas. This was horrible, and we need to seek justice.
And it seems like that's often the case, whatever the situation. Sometimes it's the offender who all the attention is paid to because they are the one that's still alive. They're the one that's trying to come up with alternative facts, if you will, alternative versions of the story. So the focus becomes about their rights, or it becomes about their narrative that they're trying to tell. In this situation, especially with the Laken Riley and the Mollie Tibbetts cases, because both of those, one we know is a perpetrator, he's been convicted. The one in Mollie Tibbetts, or in Laken Riley's case, he's a suspect. He has not been convicted. This is a new case. But both of them being undocumented workers, and we know the political climate in this country right now when it comes to immigration, I think there's been a lot of, attention around the fact that they were both here illegally.
Right.
And I think it's caused a lot of angst for the family because you just want it to be the focus on your victim.
Right.
And then when people hijack this terrible tragedy that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and they use it for their own political agenda, it is absolutely heartbreaking. I believe that's essentially what happened. Didn't one of the parents just say, hey, please, I want to, was it Mollie Tibbetts' dad, or was it Laken Riley's father that was saying, please don't make this about immigration. Take my daughter's name out of this immigration fight.
It was one of their fathers. I'm not exactly sure. But, they were also mad because Ibarra, this guy, he was in trouble in New York, and he came down here. And ends up killing her and raping her. So the immigration issue, on some people, it's bringing them closer together, and some people, it's dividing them, because some of the Hispanic students at the University of Georgia said, we are living in fear on top of grief because people don't like them being around. They're taking some stuff out on some of them, and they feel scared, but they're grieving too for Laken. So that's something that anything that stirs up like that, to me, especially with people that have open minds, and young people in college mostly do, they're pursuing knowledge and how to get along with people. They really are trying to, at the University of Georgia, cling to that, yet demand these layers of security.
Which is great. And that would be my takeaway from all of this. And I think it's wonderful that in each of these cases, so far, at least with the University of Georgia, each one, the universities have taken steps to address safety concerns, to make the families feel heard, to make them feel like, hey, we care.
Right.
Your child was a part of our family too, and we're grieving with you. And I think that's one of my takeaways, is just how well that they've handled that situation. And then also, God forbid this should happen to anyone else, but I certainly don't want to have my tragedy dragged into a political fight or a political arena.
Right.
Either.
Right. And it seems like there has to be some sort of spark or catalyst for things. But here we went from the University of West Florida to the University of Iowa to University of Georgia. very same things. Some guy with some sort of mental delusions and arrogance or what have you decides, hey, this is your last day.
I want what you've got,
Yeah.
either your body or your car, whatever it is about you. I want it. You're standing in the way of me getting it. I'll get it whether you want me to have it or not. I'll take your life to get it.
Right.
That's
right.
just, it's a pinnacle of evil. It is the epitome of selfishness.
Right. Unsuspecting little birds, basically. They're just trying to live their best life by running or just by
Getting an education,
Right.
being out on their own, living their life.
It's just so sad because here's what we have to realize. There but for the grace of God go I.
Amen.
I never thought I'd have a family member murdered, especially by a family member. And you live in a bizarre world after that. It's very it's very, I don't even know how to describe it. It's day by day and it's indescribable.
Absolutely. Well, any takeaways for you?
I think tell your parents, even if you're grown, you don't have to call them every single day. But when I was in college, my mom would say, if you're going somewhere that you don't normally go, or if you're not home, leave a note on your dresser that says, I'm at Big Daddy's disco or whatever. You know, she didn't have to know everything about me. But when I lived with my mother, even when I'd come stay with her when I was 40 years old, she wouldn't go to bed until I got home. And I worked till 10 o'clock at night at Walgreens and wouldn't get home till like 11 or something. But when the garage would come up, I'd see my mom's little legs because she's sitting on the stairs waiting to see me.
Yeah, she was a good mama.
Yeah.
And I know it's heartbreaking when you don't know what's going on with your children. But, you know, we always wish for the best. And in these cases, it was worst case scenario. But we can continue to pray for those families and that they find justice, all of them.
Right. And I pray for that campus, all the campuses, to find healing. And it makes me look back at 31 years ago about Susan Morris, and we're still talking about her. And that's what a family member like me, that's helped so much. That's why we've set up a scholarship for Sharon, for a girl in high school that wants to study science. All these cases, the families have done remarkable things and have come through and giving through the tragedy.
Absolutely. And if you'd like to learn more about Pam's sister's story, you can watch Mommy Killer 1 and 2. There's also Confessions in the Field House and Murder and Madness. So those are several episodes that we've done, and it's a case that we continue to follow, and certainly why your perspective is so valuable on these cases and the other stories that we talk about, because we try to talk about them from the victim's point of view, and you certainly understand what that's like. So thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. That is it for Dead Degrees from Dorm to Grave. Thanks for joining us again for Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Mollie Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks to director, editor, and production engineer James Roy. He just got a little something thrown at him. You can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch on YouTube, and we would love it if you go to Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel and like and subscribe as well.